Okay. I feel like I did this early. I think I scheduled it for 8, but we're gonna start now just because I feel ready. I feel good. Um, yeah, why not just start? Let me just make sure everything's working and we're live. I think we are though, yeah. Okay, yeah, we've been live for 16 seconds. But yeah, today we're gonna talk about something interesting. I found an interesting video. It's not like most of the videos that I pull up. It's broken into different subjects and different people and kind of tying together different ideas. So some of them I'm very familiar with, some of them I'm not so much. The first person, Kierkegaard, I know a little bit about. I don't know too much. Then it goes into Freud and Carl Rogers. I have no idea who it is. So should be fun. I'm gonna learn just as much as you guys today. So yeah.
Journey of self realization, of understanding and discovering who we truly are, and of maximizing our potential. While this might be a lifelong journey, one can be closer or further from one's true self. Søren Kierkegaard was a theologian and a philosopher, considered to be the father of existentialism. He also gave us one of the most profound.
I don't know if he's the father of existentialism. I feel like you see the roots of existentialism. I don't. Let me look this up. When was Kierkegaard alive? 1813. Now, when was Dostoevsky born? 1821. So him and Dostoevsky, it looks like were contemporaries. And a lot of people will either pinpoint Dostoevsky, I guess, Kierkegaard. I always thought it was Dostoevsky that really started the Inklings, but he's probably crediting Kierkegaard simply for the fact that Dostoevsky never wrote actual philosophy. His works were just interpreted to be existentialist. You got a crush on this guy? Seems like but we need my help. Seems like it all went well for you.
Analyses of the human condition, anticipating some of the fundamentals of psychoanalytic theory, and push beyond that theory to the problem of faith, and so to the deepest understanding of.
Kierkegaard is weird because he's a Christian existentialist, which you think it wouldn't really make sense. Because existentialism is nothing has meaning unless we assign it meaning, essentially. It's like picking the holes of all of these foundations, and it's almost postmodernist in a sense that like it kind of breaks down institutions, breaks down traditional values. Um, but Kierkegaard is weird because he has a different approach than what most people think Christianity is. He's more of a I would say he's closer to a mystic than a normal Christian, and that's probably why he gets these ideas to work.
of man. He
I'm so
writes the following
happy.
of the self. The human being is spirit, but what is spirit? Spirit is the self. But what is the self? The self is a relation which relates to itself. Kierkegaard believes that the self must have a relation with the eternal aspect, which in turn relates to us, allowing us to achieve true selfhood. The cause of despair is the inability of a person to become a self, as a
Okay, so the cause of despair is the inability of a person to be themselves. That's that's a tremendous way to put it. And think of the most unhappy people that you meet. It's usually somebody who has no idea even what they want. That's really what I break it down to. Like somebody that is so angry, so hateful that they're going to project that anger and rage on me. That's somebody that doesn't like themselves. That's somebody that can't accept themselves. That's somebody that thinks that the whole world needs to fix everything that's wrong in the world so that this one person could be happy. Like how arrogant of it is it of you to ask the entire world to change but not to change yourself? And I think it's really like this is the problem with the modern day world is that people want everyone else to change and not them. And it's like, cool, other people can change. Other people should change. Other people really should do some work on themselves. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't also change. That doesn't mean that you're perfect. And it's this weird, like, I don't know how people don't realize this. He's coming over tomorrow. Good for you.
Person lacks something eternally firm. Kierkegaard's notion of trying to define a self is one of his many ironies, likely intended to produce despair in one who believes he can figure out his self alone. He talks about two types of despair: infinitude's despair and finitude's despair. The infinitude's despair is the split of self and body, a split in which the self is unanchored, not bound off to everyday things. The entire person is pulled off balance. Today we call this schizophrenic psychosis. However, he gives a second and more common type of despair. But while one sort of despair plunges wildly into the infinite,
Okay, so like I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like Instagram has become just I just see a lot of people that are very crazy and I really hope that they get the help they need. But like it's it's just like there's a level of insanity that goes beyond what we usually call it. Like it's almost bad that we call people schizo. It's almost bad that we call people insane because it takes away from the people who actually are, from the people that can't discern what they are imagining and what is reality. And that seems to be what he's talking about in the first one. Um, let's
and
get into
loses
this more.
itself. A second sort permits itself, as it were, to be defrauded by the others, by seeing the multitude of men about it, by getting engaged in all sorts of worldly affairs, by becoming wise about how things go in this world. Such a man forgets himself, does not dare to believe in himself, finds it too venturesome a thing to be himself, far easier
So this reminds me of the Emerson quote: "The greatest achievement in this world is to be yourself in a world that seeks conformity." More or less, that's what he said. And I like to think that Kierkegaard is really saying the same thing. He's really saying that like most people sacrifice their happiness for the sake of comfort. And it might seem like a good thing. It might seem like there's safety numbers. It might seem like it's the right decision at the time. But to follow the herd in every decision is to lose yourself in the course of that journey.
and safer to be like the others, to become an imitation, a number, a cipher in the crowd. This is a great characterization of the herd mentality, those who do not dare stand up for their own meaning because it is too burdensome and dangerous. Better not to be oneself, better to live tucked into others, embedded in a safe framework of social and cultural obligations and duties. When one has too much finitude, one is built into his world too overwhelmingly. There is not enough freedom for the inner self. This he
I think I said this either yesterday or the day before, but it's not good to be extreme in anything. It's good to have balance. And it's the people that have balance, like absolute balance, that are able to move through the world and deal with things. Whereas if you're too far in one extreme, it's going to overextend. It's like, think of the world as a scale. If you go too far to one side, it's going to tip and start causing all sorts of issues. That's really how you have to think about your life. It's the middle path. You don't want to be too righteous. You don't want to be too wicked. You know, you don't want to open yourself up to like these, oh, I'm holier than thou, or oh, I'm just a bad person. Like, no, I think everyone has their good elements and bad elements, and it's just the acceptance of that dualistic nature that allows you to move forward and allows you to be rational in every moment, allows you to make the best decision, allows you to make the best decision for yourself. Because how often do we actually make decisions for ourselves, and how often do we make decisions based off of what other people want for us? And I think all of these are disillusioned by following the herd, by following the path, by seeing what other people are doing and trying to do it and thinking that's going to make you happy. If it makes one person happy, good, but that doesn't mean it's going to make you happy as well. And yet we think that we're going to be different. We think that we're going to be the exception. We think that we're going to take the same path as everyone else and get a better result. It's very counterintuitive.
he calls finitude's despair, or what we would call depressive psychosis. The individual cannot imagine any alternate ways of life and cannot release himself from the trivial obligations that give him no value. By surrendering to others and holding on to the people who have enslaved him in a network of crushing obligations, he accuses himself. He chooses slavery because it is safe and meaningful, but soon too this loses meaning. One has
He's saying slavery in the sense to conformity, making every single decision based off of what is expected of you.
then literally died to life, but must remain physically in this world, thus the torture of depressive psychosis, to remain steeped in one's failure and yet to justify it, to continue to draw a sense of worthwhileness out of it. He writes, "The biggest danger, that of losing oneself, can pass off in the world as quietly as if it were nothing. Every other loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is bound to be noticed." In the midst of an existential crisis, Kierkegaard wrote the following in his journals: "What I really want
When I read Kierkegaard, I think he's about to say something interesting and then he takes it in like a boring way. Um, that's really why I haven't read more of him. It's similar to how I read Freud. It's like when I read Freud, I'm like, oh, he's about to say something that's very interesting here, and then it just doesn't quite stick the landing. And I really do need to read more of Kierkegaard because I'm fascinated by the people that describe him, but when I actually read it myself, I'm not as impressed. So maybe it's just me not having read the right thing. Maybe I'm not approaching it right. But yeah, that's something I'm gonna have to put more time and energy into.
Is to be clear in my mind what I am to do, not what I am to know, except in so far
This
as a
next idea is
certain
interesting
knowledge
though.
must precede every action. The thing is to understand myself, to see what God really wishes me to do. The thing is to find a truth which is true for me, to find the idea for which I can live.
Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. The rest of this I was not that compelled by, but this is very fascinating. To see what God really wishes me to do. The thing is to find a truth which is true for me and to find the idea for which I can live and die. So this is where the existentialism gets mixed with God. Essentially what he's saying is to follow God is to follow yourself, to follow your path. And, if God really made every single strand of DNA, made exactly who you are, gave you the exact experiences. You're meant to do something. You're meant to find your bigger purpose. And it's not what other people want for you, it's what you want for yourself, which I find extremely inspiring because there's this like weird idea that you have to be a productive member of society, that you have to do this, that you have to do that. And it's like the fact that you have to do these things, the fact that they're expected of you doesn't make them noble. You know what I mean? Like, is it really impressive when a rich man gives to charity and puts his name in everything and says, "Well, I donated this, I donated that." Like, no, that seems more performative. What's really impressive is somebody that's poor that gives money to charity, or somebody that does something because they enjoy doing it. It's like I think there's this like weird idea that if you do a good thing, it makes you a good person, but if you're almost forced to do it, is that even anything? I think there's an interesting philosophical question there, and I think it's a sliding scale, but
And die. Kierkegaard's truth, which he lived and died for, was to take a leap of faith. It is not about becoming ourself, but rather to stand before God transparently, whose higher self is the only one that can overwhelm our self. The self must be destroyed in order to become a self. It is a question
so the leap of faith is like essentially you don't have proof of God, you don't have proof that what you're trying to do is going to work, but you just have to do it. Because if you don't do it, then nothing will happen. If you don't accept that there's a God, then there's nothing at the end of it. There's no meaning, there's no purpose. Like that's essentially what he's saying. It's like I really don't have a finite solution. It's something you just have to trust. And it's extremely hilarious that like a philosopher, this is his kind of conclusion with everything that he has written is that you have to take a leap of faith. You just have to take a risk. But in some ways it's very inspiring because there's always a level of risk to everything in life, no matter what it is. Even if you're getting in your car, there's still a risk that you can get into an accident. Like there's no such thing without a risk. There's no such thing as a payoff without any sort of drawback. And this is essentially what he's saying here.
of death and rebirth. The individual is thus saved from this madness by his subjective inwardness being related to God, achieving self-transcendence. However, even a religious person is not entirely free from despair, as a true believer must have his faith constantly challenged. Sigmund
If your faith isn't constantly challenged, then is it faith? Like there's a scene in Game of Thrones. I don't really think Game of Thrones is that philosophically deep, but there's these few key moments that I think are extremely powerful when it comes to honor, when it comes to bravery, when it comes to facing your fears. And essentially it's Ned Stark's wife talking about Ned Stark and saying he was not a fearless man, but he was a brave man because there's this other guy who doesn't think about anything when he goes into battle. He just does it and he loves it. But then there's people that rise to the occasion. There's people that are brave because they're afraid. Like you can't be brave if you're not afraid. And there's this certain level of testing that needs to happen to strengthen anything. Like if you go to the gym and you literally put the lightest thing on the bar and lift it and lift that for 20 years, you're not going to make any progress. It's through challenging yourself. It's through failing. It's through, coming up short. It's through, feeling like you're going to quit, feeling like you're going to give in and just keep pushing. That's essentially what he's saying.
Freud contributed immensely to the notion of self-understanding. He pushed psychoanalytic theory to its limits, but didn't come out at faith. He emphasized the creatureliness as the lasting insight on human character, mainly through an emphasis on libido, the pleasure principle.
So Freud's libido is very interesting because it's not like when we say libido, it's kind of not what Freud coined it as. Freud coined it as like a sex drive, but also like a drive for life. So like there's the obvious sex drive part to it, but then there's the part to it that's like the need to feel wanted, the need to feel like you are established, the need to feel like you're good at something, the need to have some sort of purpose, some sort of social credit, some sort of just I would say self-respect, but it's like self-respect coming from other people. Like you have some sort of position that people venerate, that sort of idea of things. Just if you've read Schopenhauer, it's just Schopenhauer's will to live,
Freud
essentially.
founded psychoanalysis after discovering that many of his patients'
Freud
symptoms were the
was
result of unconscious repression.
Freud like kind of took like a lot of these old philosophical ideas like Faust and Schopenhauer and I'm trying to remember who else influenced him. I think he cited Dostoevsky. He cited a lot of like old thinkers and he kind of like coined these ideas using their ideas, putting like a scientific backing to it. You can see it a lot in the interpretations of dreams. I haven't read enough of his other stuff to exactly pinpoint it, but a lot of these ideas seem to kind of come from these more older philosophers.
That had to be made conscious in order to cure them. He focused on psychopathology and what goes wrong with people. Many of his followers developed their own ideas, notably
Oh, I was about to say this is Jung right here. Hey, this is Freud.
Carl Jung's individuation, which we'll talk about later on. Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow are two psychologists who focus not on psychopathology, but rather on the growth potential of individuals, which also greatly contributed to our understanding of the self. Carl Rogers talks about the self concept, which we develop from childhood and continues to form and change over time as we learn about ourselves. It is the knowledge of who one is. A positive self concept makes one feel good about who they are.
So like think of people with like a good upbringing, people that had like a healthy family that always encouraged them, that always, gave them constructive criticism versus like a more rough upbringing that's going to give you a more negative sense of self. Essentially, is what he's saying right here. I think it's interesting. I've never heard of this guy, but I'm definitely gonna have to look into him because to me, the huge flaw with psychology is that it only studies sick people and it only really goes through sick people. I know I'm obviously glossing over a lot of studies, but like to me, like how many healthy minded individuals are seeking out psychologists and talking to them. So I think it's kind of skewed in that way. I think maybe it exists in the research realm of things, but I think a lot of the treatments are purely based off of sick people and the study of sick people and the study how to get them better instead of you know what I mean? Like wouldn't you want to study the success cases? Wouldn't you want to study the people that didn't deal with these issues, the people that kind of had healthy formations and modeled the treatments after them more? It's I feel like it's the same thing with like the health industry. Like the health industry gives people that have a million things wrong with them a pill and thinking that masking the symptoms is going to get to the root issue. And meanwhile, they don't just push these people to live like healthy people. Like, if you just modeled a system off of a healthy person's life and gave that to a patient that was really struggling, obviously it's going to require work and that's why it's not done, but it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same mindset. It's like glossing over the real issue that we're dealing with people that aren't willing to help themselves.
The self-concept is divided into self-image, self-esteem, and ideal self. The self-image is the way we see ourselves physically, our social roles, and our personality traits. However, the self-image doesn't always match reality. One may have a more negative view.
I think most people have a more negative view of how people view them. There's obviously like the narcissist and the people that are just really full of themselves, but I think for the most part, a lot of people don't realize how well liked they are. And this is something that like I feel like I dealt with myself. Like there was like I'm my own harshest critic. Harshest critic. I don't know why I added a T to the end of that. But like I would be so hard on myself and then I would look at other people and think they were judging me to the same amount. But like in truth, you're with yourself all day long, so you see every mistake you ever make. But the people that are your friends, the people that are your family, the people that just kind of know you briefly, they don't see everything about you, so they see like a fractured version of you. And there's a lot of times where people that have like really low self-esteem and you're like, why can't this guy do this? Why can't this guy do this? He's so talented. It's because they view themselves lesser than how other people view them. And I think I don't know. This is something I just realized in myself, and I don't know if other people have realized this as well, but this was a real sticking point for me. I was like, you know what? I'm my own worst enemy. I'm the one holding myself back the most. Like nobody is as harsh on me as I am on myself. Nobody is much of a bully to me as I am on myself. Nobody holds me back as much as I do myself. And once I started realizing that, like, yeah, there's people that don't like me. Oh, wow. Oh, what am I gonna do? Like, should I bend over backwards to make them love me? Like, no, but at the same time, it's like nothing could be more detrimental but than me hurting my own life, me hurting my own self-image, me feeling like I'm a lesser version of myself because I made a mistake, because I'm flawed, because I'm not perfect. It's very weird. What's up, El Divo? How's everything?
about oneself and others. This ties in with self-esteem, the value we place upon ourselves, which depends on our comparisons to others as well as others' responses to us. Low self-esteem occurs when we compare ourselves to others and find out that we are not nearly as successful as they are, or when people respond negatively to what we do.
There's also an element of this that like I was just saying, people view themselves as lesser than how others view themselves, but you're also viewing other people and thinking they're better than you and not seeing the full picture. Like there's been a million cases in my life where I was judging someone and I don't know if I would be jealous or if I was like, damn, this person's so good. Why couldn't I just be like them? Like I was never like vindictive. I was never like hateful or like seeking to bring others down, but like I was always like in my own head saying like, why wasn't I as athletic as this person? Why wasn't I as this person? It's like I'm pointing to somebody that has one advantage on me, but I also have an advantage on them. Like there's probably something in my life that's better than something in their life, and yet I'm envying them. It's like it's such a weird backwards way of thinking. And it's like this is why what Teddy Roosevelt said. This is why when Teddy Roosevelt said comparison is the thief of all joy, that was just the most correct statement ever. I'm pretty good. I can't complain. Nothing really wrong with me over here. So, doing what I like doing, streaming. It's always fun. So, yeah, just living life.
Then we have the ideal self, the person you strive to
Am I
be,
not
while
subscribed to
the
this
real
guy?
self is the person you are. The ideal self is used as a model to assist the real self in
This is internalized by the way, guys. I've reacted to him before. He does a really good job.
developing its potential. However, when there is an incongruence, we become neurotic and are unable to develop a more satisfying personality. We may believe that we do not have an ideal self, and our real self
We always have an idealized version of ourselves. So like if you don't think you have an idealized version of yourself, like think about your dreams and like when someone asks you where you are in 5 years, that's your idealized version of yourself. Obviously it's a projection into the future, but that's really who you want to be right now. So just understand that.
turns into a despised self. The self concept is dependent on the social situations in which we find ourselves, so we must be aware that it might be manipulated according to the feedback we receive from the environment. Abraham Maslow gave us an important framework to achieving what he calls self actualization, the realization of one's full potential. He writes, "What a man can be, he must be."
What a man can be, he must be. Okay, so what he's saying here is what your potential is, if you don't live up to it, if you don't pursue it, you're always going to be unhappy. And this is not saying that you have to go out and achieve greatness, but this is saying you have to try. Okay? I need you to understand that it's never the end that means anything. It's never the accolade that makes it all worth it. It's the blood, sweat, and tears that you experience along the way. It's the small victories. It's the feeling of getting better. It's the feeling of learning. It's the process of falling down and picking yourself back up and saying, I'm not going to fail until it happens. That's really the part that matters. That's really the part that means anything. That's really the part that, you know, is noteworthy. I'll liken it to like if you start a business and it becomes vastly successful and you pour your heart into it, it becomes a family business and you set up your family for generations. What means more, that experience or winning the lottery? It's obviously that experience. And even if it's like not that important to you, even that business is just like, I don't know, like sawdust or something, like it would still mean so much more than just getting a ticket saying, wow, I won. Like it's not even close.
Self actualization is the desire to accomplish everything that one can, to become the most that one can be, and this depends on the individual. It is the pinnacle of the hierarchy of needs, which symbolizes the human potential and the need for fulfillment. Before self actualization, one must first meet one's basic needs. Maslow's motivational theory is best represented by a pyramid, with the more basic needs at the bottom and culminating in self.
Okay, this so essentially what he is stating here is like the movement from survival to our current day and age, our current society, and how you don't really have to fight for food, how you don't really have to fight for, you know, the means to survive and that sort of stuff. And how it's kind of shifted to something much different.
Self-actualization. We start from the basic physiological needs of food, water, warmth, sex, and rest, to the safety needs of security, employment, resources, health, and property. These two are important to the survival of the individual, to cover one's basic nutrition, shelter, and safety. Then we have our psychological needs, belongingness and love, which include our intimate relationship and friends, and the esteem needs, prestige, feeling of accomplishment, and recognition.
So all of these things, I think esteem is the most, safety and esteem are probably the most sought after. And I don't know why love and belonging is so low. I think love and belonging should be higher. Because I know a lot of people with safety and esteem that don't feel any sort of satisfaction in their life because they don't have this. And it's I don't know. I would just disagree in some of the placements of
These four
this.
levels make up our deficiency needs. Maslow described human needs as being relatively fluid, with many needs being present in a person simultaneously, rather than being a fixed and rigid sequence of progression. Nevertheless, human needs can only be fulfilled one level at a time. In his later years, he explored a further dimension of growth.
Okay, I think this is probably a better. Anytime you break these things down, I think you can get into um, more specific terms and more descriptive terms.
Needs, while criticizing his own vision
Okay, physiological needs, safety needs, belonging needs, esteem needs, cognitive needs, aesthetics. So, okay, I think this is pretty fair.
on self-actualization. He added the cognitive level, the need for intellectual stimulation, the aesthetic level, the need for harmony, order, and beauty,
Transcendence is like coming to grips with your mortality, coming to grips with your death. I'm
and on top
assuming.
of self-actualization, he put self-transcendence. This is quite an interesting add-on, which goes back to Kierkegaard's idea, the spiritual needs that transcend beyond the personal self. He writes, transcendence refers to the very highest and most inclusive or holistic levels of human consciousness, behaving and relating as ends rather than means, to oneself, to significant
Yeah, coming to grips with your part in the world, coming to grips with deeper spiritual questions like what is the meaning of being here? Why am I here? Like this is like a really sad thing to say, but like there's a whole lot of people that are on their deathbed that like have regrets, and it's almost like the greatest achievement you can have in this life is to die happy, is to know you did it all, is to know you had a good time around the earth.
others, to human beings in general, to other species, to nature, and to the cosmos. It is the idea of giving oneself to something beyond oneself. This can include mystical experiences, religious faith, altruism, and so on. We can link the idea of transcendence with Eastern philosophy. Self-realization has different meanings in Western and Eastern cultures, with
So self-realization is not really a Western ideal. Think about it this way. The West wishes to kind of destroy the self and become part of the infinite, become just part of. the transcendent. Like you lose your ego completely, you lose your sense of identity completely. That's when you become like a mystic or a guru or a Buddha-like figure. That's really what it's talking about. And the more Western mind, like Jung's individuation or Nietzsche's Urmensch or that sort of things, you're still an individual, but you live every moment embodying your ideal. You live every moment living your life to the fullest and doing everything because you want to do it. Those are really the two main differences.
With a few exceptions, the West generally has a multitude of definitions of what the self is, whereas the predominant view in the East is that
The definitions are the same. Don't it's the self is just the part of yourself that you project into the world, and every definition is that way. I don't know like saying that.
the self is an illusory fiction and does not exist in reality. Buddhism denies the existence of a self and believes that it represents a series of transient psychological states. Therefore, self-realization
It's what William Blake said as well.
is a contradiction in terms. For Buddhists, life is suffering. That is the first noble truth. But this suffering comes from craving, desire, and attachment. One must let go of the craving by practicing asceticism in order to liberate.
So Buddha says all suffering comes from desire, meaning that everything that you want is really destroying you. And the state of not wanting anything, the state of just being, is the desired state, essentially.
Oneself from samsara, the endless cycle of rebirth, where one is reborn depending on their karma. It is an endless drifting in mundane existence. To liberate oneself, one must engage in a lifelong practice of what is known as the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes the activities that allows one to achieve nirvana, the freedom from suffering and rebirth. Salvation is the realization
So just think of like minimalism, like you only eat the bare minimum, you only have the bare minimum of clothes, you don't even really speak, um, you meditate most of the day. It's I don't know. The aesthetics there's some interesting ideas in there, but it's just I don't think it's possible for me being raised in the West to ever kind of want those ideas.
of the non-self. Taoism accentuates the falsehood of language. The so-called Tao, the essence of life and the universe, or the way, cannot be described by human language. According to the doctrine of Taoism, the self is but one of the countless manifestations of the Tao. It is an extension of the cosmos. Taoism describes the self in the following way. The perfect man has no self. The
This is what I was saying earlier, like you're not really yourself. You kind of just like your name doesn't matter. Your life doesn't really matter. It's just this moment is the only thing that matters, essentially. Um, that's the easiest way to think about it. And it's very different from all the transformations that you see in like oh, I mixed this up earlier. The eastern side of things is you lose yourself. The western side of things is that you do a process. My favorite word is the individuation process. That's my favorite way to think of it. You do a process of finding out who you really are and living in that state as much as possible, embodying those ideals as much as possible, not needing anything, just pure presence. They're fairly similar, but one drops the self and one controls the self. One kind of curtails your more negative behavior into something more positive, something more productive.
spiritual man has no achievement. The true sage has no name. The ideal of Taoism, therefore, is the achievement of a lack of self. In Advaita Vedanta, literally non-duality, a school of Hindu philosophy and spiritual experience, the goal is to gain self-knowledge, and in contrast to Buddhism and Taoism, seeks a complete understanding of one's true self, or Atman.
All of these ideas are fairly similar. I don't know if this is like theorized. I don't know if this is really talked about, but there seems to be like a very common thread in these religions. Like some people say that even Buddhism is just Hinduism stripped of its deity, which I could definitely see because there's a lot of similarities.
Which transcends our physical bodies. One can do so by understanding the ultimate reality of existence, or Brahman, understanding that this world is temporal and is entangled in the web of Maya, which is the powerful force that creates the cosmic illusion that this world is real. Things that appear present are as a result of an illusion
Just think of monad. I don't know if I've explained this idea. Everything's an extension of everything else. There's one consciousness, there's one universal being. That's essentially what he's saying.
of appearance. This includes our ego, the hallmark of self-ignorance. Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, describes the self as the totality of one's personality, composed of our consciousness and the unconscious. The self is superior to the ego, since the latter only amounts to the
The ego is just what society tells you are. So, like, think of the traits you have because of your job, think of the traits you have because of your place in society, how you posture yourself because of this idea, your culture, these sorts of things. And the self is like your individual characteristics, your individual experiences, the things that really shape you. And it's encompassing of more than just the ego. The ego is really just the outward facing side of yourself, whereas the self just is everything. So, like, even the memories you don't remember that are still influencing you, it's that sort of thing.
conscious personality. It is important to recognize that the ego is not the center of our personality. Jung writes, I began to understand that the goal of psychic development is the self. There is no linear evolution, there is only a circumambulation of the self. This insight gave me stability, and gradually my inner peace returned. I knew that in finding the mandala as an expression of the self, I had achieved what was for me the ultimate. Perhaps someone else knows more, but not I. Jung tells us that our psyche
So essentially what he's saying is that it's not like something that will be fixed instantly. It's something that you constantly struggle with that eventually becomes better. So like think if you do like this amount of work, then you'll be good for this amount of time, and then it'll go back down. And then you got to do a little bit of more work. And now the waves are smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just straight.
can be split into three
I
different
don't
realms.
know if that made sense to me, but I don't know if that made sense to anybody.
Consciousness, the field of awareness where our ego resides, the personal unconscious, that which is unique to each individual but has been
Your conscious is like the things you go through your day-to-day life, stuff like that. Personal unconscious is every experience you ever had, especially the ones that you forget, and the things that slowly kind of guide you in certain directions.
forgotten or repressed, and the collective unconscious, which
Collective unconscious is just universal symbols, the hero symbol, the trickster archetype, anima, and like things that we just have a definition for, but we don't understand why. Think of like the American dream or the manifest destiny or the idea of a good life, the white picket fence, the 50s America that really like even the idealized versions of these, they really weren't the reality. Like 50s America isn't as good as we say it was. There was a lot of bad stuff still going on. So it's like
which is the deepest part of our unconscious, the inherited and shared psychic material across all humans. It represents universal patterns of emotional and mental behavior, or archetypes. Only being aware of our conscious personality amounts to self-ignorance and delusion of the reality of the self. True self-knowledge comes upon investigating one's inner world, the unconscious realm. And for Jung, this is the true journey of life. His central concept of self-realization revolves around individuation, while it occurs
individuation, put very simply, is trying new things, going out and doing new things, experiencing all life has to offer, and finding yourself through that. Like, how do you know if you don't like water skiing if you never water skied? How do you like, how do you know you don't like video games if you don't play video? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, and that's a very simplistic example. It's usually much bigger decisions. It's like, is this the career path, the one that's right for me? Is starting a family now, is that something I really want? Like, it's usually those bigger decisions. It's usually like facing your fears, facing the things that you've been avoiding and going out and doing them. That's usually what it is, but it's just easier to think of it in a simplistic way.
naturally as we grow older. This is a mere passive form and we're not conscious of the process. Jung proposes becoming consciously aware of individuation through a lifelong process in which the center of psychological life shifts from the ego to the self, bringing one's unconscious contents into consciousness. These unconscious contents include the symbolic manifestations of the archetypes. Thus, one gains the knowledge of the timeless patterns of human life. Jung's goal is not to strive for perfection, but rather achieve wholeness of personality. Man becomes whole, integrated, calm,
When he talks about integrated, it's just think like when you get angry in traffic, are you really angry at that person? Or is it just because you are manifesting some other emotion that you don't let out? And a lot of it is like think about it this way, like if you don't let out your emotions, it's going to usually come out when you can't control it and in the form of anger. And like, would you rather be angry at some random stranger, angry at people that you love, or would you rather express that love or express that emotion in another way, in a more healthy way, in a more, beneficial way to you? And that's essentially what he's talking about, integration. It's curtailing your more negative influences to be more useful. Like there's the common trend of like, oh, when you go through a breakup, just go to the gym. And like there really is something in that. Like you are pent up with energy, you're pent up with rage, and you could spend the rest of the night texting that person, telling them how evil they are, or you could just go to the gym and work out those feelings, get rid of those things. Damn, look who decided to show up. She's finally here in one of my streams. The only reason I stream, guys, and she doesn't show up.
fertile and happy, when and only when the process of individuation is complete, when the conscious and the unconscious have learned to live at peace and to complement one another. The most common way to interact with the unconscious is through dreams. Using the symbolic images of dreams, Jung found that the unconscious was conveying crucial information to help the entire psyche reach a balance, which
This is what Freud called wish fulfillment. Essentially, what it means is that if you don't live out a facet of your being in your day-to-day life, you're going to live it out in your dreams. So through your dreams is the indication of what you're really seeking for most.
the conscious attitude has repressed in order to reach a psychic equilibrium. This is known as the compensatory role of dreams. It is on such evidence that psychologists assume the existence of an unconscious psyche. Throughout his life, Jung interpreted around 80,000 dreams, and he discovered that they follow a pattern. If one pays attention to one's dreams over a long period of time, one will see that certain contents emerge, disappear,
Jung has a book called Psychology and Alchemy where he kind of tracks the symbols of transformation as different patients at different times see certain symbols, see certain archetypes, see certain things, and it signals a change in their life. It signals a certain stage of their life. Extremely fascinating. It's very like dense because the symbols are all like mystic and esoteric and like you have to have a lot of background to kind of get what he's saying, but it's very interesting.
and then turn up again. This slow process of psychic growth is the process of individuation. Some of the common archetypes include the trickster, the hero, the wise old man, and the great mother. These are not only present in dreams, but are
They're present in every great story. Every great story has some element of these archetypes, or it wouldn't be a great story. Even good stories that subvert archetypes, that subvert heroes, that subvert our expectations, they all have a certain element of this. And it's the respect for these archetypes that allow a good storyteller to tell a good story. And it's because today we don't have writers that respect archetypes that even understand them. That's why writing's so piss poor.
represented throughout human history and mythology. Modern man believes that he can control himself, but self-control is a rare virtue. Jung writes, "The one thing we refuse to admit is that we are dependent upon powers that are beyond our control." An important
The one thing we refuse to admit is that we are dependent upon powers that are beyond our control. Think about everything that happened to you as a kid. Think about all of your experiences. Even if they're not consciously affecting you, they're still affecting you. Like, why are people afraid to speak in public? You could say it's some primal fear of being ostracized, but couldn't it also be that you raised your hand when you were a kid, said something stupid, everyone laughed, and now for the rest of your life, you're terrified to speak in front of people, you're terrified to have that same ridicule? And it's like there's all these sorts of forces that compel us in certain directions, and once we start recognizing that these things are compelling us, then we can understand why we do certain things. We can understand why we fall short, and we can stop blaming ourselves for these things.
An important archetype is the shadow, which Jung calls the unknown dark side of the personality. It is that which contains the hidden, repressed, and unfavorable aspect of one's personality. We deny the existence of all things we despise in ourselves while attributing them to others. However, it is not only our negative aspects which we repress, but also our positive.
Everything that you say about others is what you really view about yourself. But once you understand that, then you try to curtail these things. You try to find why you're saying these things, why these things are such big sticking points for you. Like any insult, any discouragement, any judgment placed on others is really something that should be observed and really something that should be worked out in yourself first. It's that this is one of the most like interesting parts of the Bible is the he who hath no sin cast the first stone. Um, basically stating that how dare you judge someone else before you judge yourself? And I think that's one thing that if you live by, you're really gonna live a good life.
Aspects such as honesty, creativity, and competitiveness, which must be rescued from within our shadow. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Moreover, one cannot individuate as long as one is playing a role to oneself. The persona is the mask which conceals one's true self, presenting oneself as different to who one really is. This makes it particularly difficult to interact with the unconscious. We may perhaps become likable to others, but it is at the cost of our own mental stability. This is all the more dangerous when one is not aware of the social mask
As
and
enough for a second,
confuses
my
it
bad.
with one's true self. As we please others with our false self, it leaves negative traits that contradict our real self, making us a passive victim of our shadow. It must be us who integrate
There's almost like this, like we've heard this forever. Like when you push something down, it bubbles up in ways that you really can't control. And this is seen through like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or people like that. People with like Two-Face is another really good villain that has that sort of idea about it. There's something fundamental about you're going to be yourself whether you like it or not, so you might as well do it in an efficient and a productive manner.
our shadow and not the other way around. This can be done through shadow work, the practice which includes self-awareness, watching one's emotional reactions, being radically honest, and investigating one's dreams. There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. To round itself out, life calls not for perfection, but for completeness, and for this, the thorn in the flesh is needed, the suffering of defects, without which there's no progress and no ascent.
Okay. The suffering of defects without which there is no progress and no ascent. Think about it this way. I made this example probably like 20 minutes ago, but if you're never faced with any challenges, then you have no reason to grow. You have no reason to get better. So if you live your life without having to face anything, you're going to go through life wildly unprepared for what life has for you. So it's when you face your fears, it's when you fall down, it's when you realize that I need to be a little bit better here. I need to do this better next time. Oh, I went through this and I failed, and the experience really wasn't that bad, so now I'm not afraid of failing anymore. And now I can attack it that much harder next time. Like all sorts of these thoughts can begin to occur, but only once you face things, only once you face struggle. Okay, that was a pretty good video. How long am I streaming for? 45 minutes. I have something I have to go do, and I have family here, so I'm gonna go hang out with them. But thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for having a fun stream. I will talk to you guys very, very soon. Peace out. I will catch you the next one.